Everybody's giving high fives. Welcome into Church Pew Sports, where we connect sports to life and faith. It is good to have you all with us. It's been a couple of weeks, and that's largely my fault because this flu bug that I signed up for, I'll never sign up for it again. I thought it was going to be cool and really fun and exciting, and as it turns out, it's really not all that fun. Do not recommend it. Still coughing like crazy, so I'll try to mute myself whenever that's going to happen. But we do have a very fun conversation for you this evening as we talk about the biggest trades in sports history, of course, triggered by what happened between the Mavericks and the Lakers. And on a sidebar, the Jazz. We'll get into that here in a moment. Bill Hobson here. Paul Miller joins us from, I think this week he's in the Chicago area, right?
I am in Chicago for a conference with the EFCA, but I just decided to enhance my background for all you guys
Yeah.
because
So for
it's
those of you who are just listening to the podcast, Paul's Zoom background is a national championship trophy. Although I think theoretically he could have grabbed that from the Michigan scene from the year prior. I don't see any specific team indicated. He's just celebrating the fact that there are champions in this nation of ours. Nothing,
yes,
nobody in particular.
exactly. As long as it's the Big Ten, I'm happy.
You're a little happier now than I normally
Well,
am.
yeah, that too. That too.
Also joining us, David Collins, checking in from the Grand Rapids area, and John Fitzsimmons. It's been a while, Fitzy, since we've had you in this conversation. So welcome aboard.
Thank you guys. Nice to be here tonight.
Yeah, and I told you off air that for 1 week I was a Notre Dame fan, and it will never happen again.
That's fine. That's fine. It's all right. Football season's over with, at least college wise. One more game for NFL, and then baseball season starts. So I'm happy.
Are already into spring. All right, that's fine because that means the Masters isn't too far away. Before we get there, though, there was a seismic shakeup in the sports world in the last couple of days, which is unusual that it happened during Super Bowl week. And so
Yeah.
for all of the thought that NFL dominates all news cycles at all times, the NBA kind of snuck one in here with its trade deadline being during that Super Bowl off week. And of course, the big news would have been the trade between the Dallas Mavericks and the LA Lakers, sending Luka Doncic from Dallas to LA, sending Anthony Street Clothes Davis to Dallas, and a whole lot of mushroom cloud spilling out of all of that. So, David, let me start with you. When you first saw the news of the trade, did it catch your attention at all, being the big NBA fan that you are?
Yeah, it was shocking, obviously, but for a lot of the reasons that a lot of people have been talking about already. You're like Rudy Gobert got 4 first round picks. Like all these guys that get traded that are top level talents, they wind up bringing back 3, 4, 5 first round picks. So to see it happen for Anthony Davis in a first was incredibly shocking. And Charles Barkley tried to defend it, and I see where he's coming from. Anthony Davis actually has played more games over the last couple of years than people want to give him credit for. But he's 31. He's turning 32, I think, in a month. And you have a top five player in the NBA who just took your team to the finals, and he's 25. You
Yeah.
just don't ship those guys away. And
Oh,
so
shopping them or something.
it's crazy. And they didn't shop him at all. It was like a thief in the night. Like everything just kind of all of a sudden, Rob Pelinka's walking around looking like Rob Lowe, and he boom, there he goes. He's got the next 10 to 12 years of the centerpiece for the Lakers franchise because LeBron's probably got a couple of years left, maybe.
Yeah.
But now you're looking at Luka Doncic leading that team into the future. And then when Bron leaves and that money's off the books, you can start building a roster around Luka. I just think it's an unbelievable trade for the Lakers. I'm not Nico Harrison. I'm not totally certain what he was doing there. But yeah, it was absolutely blew me away. Like when I saw the text come in and all of a sudden my phone's blowing up, everybody had their opinions. But it's so weird to have something like this happen, and it's almost unanimous what everyone thinks about it.
Yeah.
And Paul, you've got a son in Dallas, so I know you were hearing about this.
Yeah, I just pulled up the text conversation I had with my son Jake, where I'll just read to you guys. He said, Luca traded for a bag of rocks. Dallas sports fans are pissed. So I'm like, oh, I bet they are. And he said, yeah, everyone's talking about it. I have like 400 unread text messages on my phone. So they're just beside themselves. He lives right in the heart of downtown Dallas, and so he can spit off his apartment balcony and hit the American Airlines Center kind of thing. So he's
Maybe doing.
texting me pictures of like the coffins that the fans are putting out in front of the stadium and all that. He's right in the middle of all of it. He's not a huge basketball fan, but his girlfriend's dad has a skybox, so he goes to Stars games and uh,
Mavs.
Mavs games whenever he can. Yeah, so they're all a little up in arms, which is why I think it's a big deal, right? Because here we are talking about it, and I'm not looking at the screen and seeing any Lakers fans or Mavs fans,
Well,
right? But
yeah,
it's still a thing.
yeah, a couple of strange, I think strange opinions have come out of the post trade. When I listen
Yeah.
for NBA expertise, then there are a handful of guys that I will tune into their podcasts and some of the insiders who live the game. I used to live, I don't live the game anymore, but most of the consideration that I've been hearing is that the Mavs in the short term won this trade.
Hmm.
Um, because Anthony Davis is currently healthy and playing pretty well. John Fitzsimmons, I don't know if you have any opinion on how all this stuff comes together, but I do know this: not only is Fitzy a Notre Dame guy, but somehow he is a Boston Celtics guy, and
That's
that
right.
that brings me to the only aspect of this whole story that I really find hilarious and fascinating. So I'll try to make it pretty clear cut, and I'm going to play a soundbite that'll really help lend some shape to it. But for those two teams, for Dallas and LA, to pull off the trade, um, LA needed to dump off some more players off of its roster, some money off its roster, make some other moves. And so Rob Pelinka, the Rob Lowe lookalike that David mentioned, contacted the general manager of the Utah Jazz, John Fitzsimmons. Any idea who that may be?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't know all the GMs of the NBA, honestly.
No,
So
that's okay.
I don't know.
He is near, if not at the top of my list of most detested Celtics in history. David Collins, who might that be?
Danny Ainge?
Danny Ainge. And Danny Ainge,
Yeah.
David, I want you to jump in and correct me if I get this off the rails. Ainge is, innocently sitting in his office as the GM of the Utah Jazz at some point in the last few days, and he gets a phone call from LA who says, "I got a couple of players here that I need to move out. Would you like them?" And I think that was the extent of the conversation. And Ainge said, sure. Well, the only way the trade went through between Dallas and LA is if LA could move those players out.
Did
And
they tell Ainge that ahead of time?
no. So
Oh, wow.
here's the conversation between Baron Davis and I can't remember who else on a podcast of NBA insiders. This is about a minute long, but it's fascinating.
Rob Pelinka called Danny Ainge and make the trade and didn't tell him nothing about this.
1000%. Here's how he can get away with it, though. Because in that deal, the only thing that went to Utah was Hushfino and 2 second-round picks from the
And
Lakers.
some picks, yeah.
It wasn't like it was Dallas pick or
You didn't have to give up nothing.
no, the picks came from the Lakers. So you didn't have to let him know that there was a third team involved because everything that Utah received came from the Lakers.
Hey, Danny Ainge, I got these 2 picks and Hood Shavino. Hey, what you thinking? Oh, man, what? Let me give you those. He's like, thank you.
Thank you. Got 2 more picks.
Let me call Nico. Nico is done. It's done. I got Utah involved. They gonna take. Oh man.
Hey, 30 minutes later, it come across Danny Ainge's ticker. Luka Doncic traded.
Hey, you know Danny Ainge is hot. He even said it. He basically said he had no idea that he was helping the Lakers.
And then he said, by the time he found out, it was too late.
Wow, that's like gangster.
I mean, that's like almost from the movie Draft Day kind of level of Hollywood
Yeah.
script writing. So Fitzy, that's why I say Danny Ainge, it could not have happened to a nicer guy, at least from the Pistons' perspective. And meanwhile, in Dallas, to say that there's pitchforks and torches at the castle gates is an understatement. Here's a guy, it's a citizen of Dallas, apparently he is regularly a feature at the city council meetings, making a nuisance of himself. But in this case, he was hoping to unite the city council.
Technical foul on the Mavericks. Ejection. Nico Harrison. Listen, I come up here all the time and I give you guys the business, but today I am not an adversary. Today I am a friend, not a foe, because we have all been cheated. The Dallas Mavericks traded our franchise player, Luka Doncic, for Anthony Day-to-Day Davis, a 32-year-old who wears street clothes more than he wears a basketball jersey.
So this is our city council meeting now being taken over. So let's put a bow on this whole thing.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's not very often these days that we get that sort of seismic player movement, right? In Detroit, for instance, David, what would rattle our cages to that extent? Would it be a Hutch trade or something like that? I mean, what would be a comparative?
See, I don't know if there is necessarily a comparison because, again, you're talking about a generational top 5 player talent for the next 10 to 12 years. And the thing is, he comes from overseas. He's speaking in his second language. He and the city felt like they knew each other. And I can't even imagine. Hutch, yeah, obviously that would be a blow. Like if you traded Gibbs or you traded Amon-Ra or something, yeah, that would stink. But this is this is if you had Tom Brady and traded him almost, except, without the rings. But you get a guy that is that level, that means that much to a city. There are a lot of Dallas fans that are saying, I'm not a Mavs fan anymore. They took something from me that meant too much to me. And that's the thing. A lot of times an athlete can endear themselves to your city in those kinds of ways. And for them to rip that away from you, again, like I said, a thief in the night, I guess I imagine when was it the Browns moved to Baltimore or whatever it was, that would crush me if all of a sudden I wake up and it's like, hey, the Lions are heading to, Oklahoma City. That would kill me. So I just think this is more magnitude than any current player we have right now in Detroit. I don't know how to even make that comparison.
Yeah, David, do you buy the whole none of the players involved knew ahead of time? Do you think that's legit?
That's a tough one. The one guy, the whole LeBron thing, saying he found out at dinner. I don't think he found out by scrolling Twitter at dinner. I think he may not have been in the know, but he definitely got the call probably right before it was announced from, I think it was Maverick Carter or I forget the other guy's name at the moment, but I think he was alerted maybe at dinner, but I do think that the guys that he works with Clutch Management, et cetera, because they're also the agents for Anthony Davis.
Right.
So there's, you got to think though that they're uber professional and they're the types of people that they're not going to I don't think this trade happens if there's too many people in the know, because the minute Luka gets word on it, the minute that LeBron and these other players get word on it, then they start getting their input and they start trying to, submarine the trade or let's not do that, and then Luka starts saying, no, I'm not going there. I think this had to happen relatively in secret. So it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't know until shortly before it was announced, maybe within a few hours, but you never know with these things. It's hard to tell because apparently, was it Jason Kidd or somebody said that they knew 48 hours before it happened that this was going to go down, and it all stayed under wraps, which is shocking in this day and age. Even Shams, before he reported it, for everybody to keep a lid on it and then shock us with it, that's really surprising. So that means to me, less people knew about it than a lot of people are alleging.
Watching that press conference where the GM announced the trade with kids sitting right next to him who looked very shocked, and very, very displeased. If I'm a head coach and I just received a really good player, I just received Anthony Davis. I mean, that's a pretty good player. I would probably I would put a smile on somehow. I'd put the mask on or flip the switch or whatever. He looked stunned by all of it. And I don't know how you do all of that without consulting a coach. So I don't know, Fitzy, as you look at how teams are constructed, if you look at how GM coach relationships are, and if you look at the reality that most of the time there's a story behind the story, right? What, how do you summarize this whole scenario as you kind of think about that trade?
Honestly, like I've been racking my brain. I teach fifth grade right now. So, of course, the boys have been talking about this nonstop all week,
Yeah.
just because the Lions aren't in the Super Bowl, unfortunately. So, they have to talk about something sports related. And one of the kids brought up the point that, the Mavs got younger because they got Luka. Or no, sorry, the Lakers got younger because they got Luka now. And I brought up the point with, okay, but who's the center? Because you have LeBron at power forward. Who's the center now? They traded away
went out and got Mark Williams from
Mark Williams. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know about that. I
They,
mean, I'm
they
talking.
didn't do that till later on.
Okay, I was talking about during after that big trade. I'm like, okay, now who's their center going to be? It's like, oh yeah, you got a point. I'm like, I know Anthony, AD is day to day, or he, wears street clothes more than he plays, which is understandable. But it's like I don't even know who won the trade, to be honest with you, at the time. I look at it now. I think the Lakers, ended up winning that trade.
So just so everybody knows that in the NBA, at certain points in your career, you're eligible for another level of contract. Now, nobody in this whole scenario is going to go broke. But I believe Luka was a year away from signing what's called a supermax deal. Now, I don't know what compensation looks like in all of our various lines of work. Here at Hobson Media, we don't have a supermax category to enter into. Paul, probably, I don't know, maybe in the EFCA, maybe you do. I'm not really sure. But I know, I don't know if David, if
I'm 5 years away from the EFCA Supermax.
Supermax, very good. And David, in your world, probably pretty close, right? Rapid advancement Supermax.
Yeah. It is amazing though that trade potentially cost Luka like $100 million on the back
Yeah,
end.
that's what I was getting to. That's amazing. And so to go to your point, David, about how important secrecy was, I guess would be that Luka, had he known, does everything in his power to say, I'm not going there. This is going to cost me $100 million. He looked, it seemed like, if nothing else, self-preservation would have been part of it.
And I also find something very funny about this is Mark Cuban sold off a huge part of his ownership share, and yet he kept going into the media and saying, yeah, I still run basketball. I still do all this stuff. And the second this trade was announced, he came out and was like, I am not in charge of any of this stuff. Like, that was hilarious to me. Like, he wanted to be very clear to the Dallas fans, that wasn't me. That was somebody else.
He had just recently given an interview, asked if you had to choose between your wife and Luka, who would it be? And he said, I would tell my wife to start packing things up. So, oh dear, a lot of stuff a lot of fallout still to come. So, but for those of you who don't care that much about the NBA or don't care that much about these two teams, it all fits under the umbrella, Paul, of where we're headed tonight, which is just to talk about seismic trades in sports history. And there have been some needle movers over the years. This is the biggest one, I think, in recent years, but we don't have to go back. Well, we can go back a long ways, I guess, if you want to go all the way back to the curse of the Bambino.
Yeah. So what I did was I gave myself two criteria, and I just kind of brainstormed a list of trades that I was shocked, or some of them are not trades that I was around for, right? They happened before my time or whatever. But my two criteria were the impact on fans has to go beyond the two teams involved, and it has to arguably change the competitive balance of whatever league it's a part of, right? And so the first one on my list was Babe Ruth going to the Yankees in 1920 or whatever. I did a little homework on each of these, right? He went for $100,000. That's what the trade was, for $100,000. That was it. And at the time, he was already a two-time home run champ. So it wasn't like Babe Ruth was some nobody that they had no idea who he was going to become, right? And so I'm not a baseball guy, but I don't know, and I don't know what $100,000 means in 1920. It's probably a good chunk of change, right? But still.
Mr. Fitzsimmons, I think, has some vested interest in talking about that particular trade as a Red Sox fan.
Yes.
Yeah, that trade hurts, to be honest. I mean, I wasn't alive back then, obviously, but I do believe, piggyback off that, I believe it was $100,000 plus a $300,000 loan in 1920. So,
Oh, really?
I mean, it was, the Yankees got the best bet of that one because the Red Sox didn't win another one until many, many years later.
Okay, so we were talking in our text thread a bit about how during the summer times in the late 80s and into the 90s, serving on staff at Hiawatha Youth Camp, the only connection to the outside world, there's no internet, there's no nothing, was a daily newspaper that the late director of the camp, Billy Walker, would drive into town to get every day. It would be the Detroit News most often from the Arctic Inn. David Collins remembers these days because his chapter of all that came after mine, but same concept, right? And it was in early August of 1989, I do believe, when we were outside playing basketball or up on the softball field or something. And I wish I could remember who it was. I think it was Billy Walker Jr., who's been on this podcast before. Somebody had the newspaper. And now it's summertime. We're not paying any attention to hockey, but they came walking up or running up to where all of us were and said, Gretzky just got traded. And at the time, arguably the most famous athlete on the planet, or close to it, certainly for hockey. And he got shipped from Edmonton to the LA Kings, partially because the owner of the Oilers in Edmonton was out of money and needed money. Here's a quick recap from a website called WatchMojo.com.
Wayne Gretzky is known as the Great One, and his trade from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings changed the NHL forever.
There's no real precedent for Wayne Gretzky in hockey, and there's no one who came after him who plays like him. He's a one-off. He's like a great musician or a great artist. He reimagined the game in some ways and did that without huge physical gifts. And yet, something else about him allowed him to play hockey and to score goals and to set up goals and to see the pattern of the game, the larger game, better than anyone I think who had ever lived. So the Edmonton Oilers had just won their 4th Stanley Cup. Gretzky was acknowledged certainly by hockey fans as maybe the greatest player who had ever lived. Peter Pocklington, who owned the Oilers, was in financial trouble. He had issues. He was a wheeler dealer in his own right. And he also understood that Gretzky was he'd lose him eventually at the end of his contract. At the same time, a guy in LA named Bruce McNall had bought the Los Angeles Kings. He had money, or at least he had other people's money, and he had an idea, which was, what if we bring the greatest hockey player in the world to California, to Hollywood? What would happen?
And what happened was a seismic shift in the balance of power in the league, and the all-time Canadian great became an all-time American player, player for an American team. And I still remember kind of the moment we found that out, because I think big trades give you that. Do you remember when you heard this moment? For the most part, I don't know. And David, maybe for our listeners' sake, you can kind of color in some of the context for how desperate we were during the summers for nuggets of sports news, and then when they came, it stopped everything in its tracks.
Yeah, well, first I want to give a stat about Gretzky, which I find to be one of the best sports stats I've ever heard. If you take away every single one of his goals, he would still lead the NHL all-time in points.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
It's one of the most amazing stats in history. But the second thing is, I have a similar experience to what you were just talking about. We were sitting in a staff meeting. Billy Jr. walks in. He holds up the newspaper. The full front has a picture of Dominik Hasek when we traded for him right in 2002. And he just said, fellas, we're going to win the Stanley Cup. So that was the same experience I had. He walked in, held it up, and said, we got Hasek. We're going to win the Stanley Cup. And we, of course, went on and won it in 2002. But that was exactly the same thing. We had no way of knowing what happened in the sports world. And he walked in that day, and that's all we could think about the rest of the day. And, of course, we went on and pulled it off.
Paul, what's one of your big remember that moments, trade seismic moments?
I remember when Herschel Walker went to the Vikings.
Yeah.
right? That was because I'm a Bears fan, right? And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, they just got this stud from the Cowboys. And then I saw the details of the trade. It was like what, like 3 firsts and 3 seconds and a couple other picks. And they leveraged everything for that guy. And it certainly, the Cowboys certainly won that trade because they went on to what, like 3 Super Bowls in the 90s or something like that with all the draft capital they got from that trade.
That was
But at the time,
1989.
89. Yeah, I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what is this going to do to the NFC, to the Bears division? You know, are they going to be any good now? And they weren't, but the Cowboys sure were. Yeah,
So
so that
we
was
had Gretzky. I think I said it incorrectly. We had Gretzky in 88, and then we had Herschel in 89.
yeah.
And knowing that we would talk a little bit about that trade, I looked up some history on that trade because I think the common assumption is, or the memory is, that Jimmy Johnson so deeply fleeced the Vikings that they just, they gave up the entire school bus full of players. That's not exactly how it worked out. In fact, let me play this little soundbite that spells out how much more diabolical Johnson was in setting up this deal.
That time, the Minnesota Vikings gave the Dallas Cowboys a dynasty. Back in 1889, the Vikings were looking to add a star to bring home their first ever Super Bowl, while the Cowboys were looking at a complete rebuild. Hall of Fame coach Jimmy Johnson thought only a blockbuster trade could help turn the 1-15 Cowboys around. So he traded 2-time Pro Bowler Herschel Walker to the Vikings for a few average role players and mid-round picks. The deal wasn't structured like any trades you see today. There was a clause that if the Cowboys cut the players they acquired from Minnesota, they could get high picks from the Vikings in the upcoming drafts instead. Minnesota didn't expect them to cut any of the players because of how bad the Cowboys roster was, but Jimmy Johnson did the unthinkable and cut every single one. Dallas ended up getting many key contributors for years to come from this deal, but none bigger than the NFL's all-time leading rusher, Emmitt Smith. The players acquired helped the Cowboys capture 3 Super Bowl rings in the 90s, while the Vikings gave up on the Herschel Walker experiment after the 1991 season and are still looking for their first ever Super Bowl.
Okay, so
I did not know that. That sounds amazing.
So here's the thing. Johnson says, "Hey, listen, we're gonna do it this way, and we'll send you guys some, or we'll take some of your mediocre players. You know how bad we are. We don't have any chance. We're 1-15, or whatever we are. We're going to take the worst players that you have, and we'll fit them in there somehow, partner." With this little caveat that should we happen to cut any of those players, they would be replaced by one of your future draft picks.
Like a first or a second rounder.
They wouldn't cut all of them. I did not know that until I was doing some research on all this. I mean, you talk about seismic fleecings and trades.
So what does it say about me as a person that actually makes me respect Jimmy Johnson?
Yeah,
And
same
it
thing.
makes it, it's like, oh,
Really?
that's pretty cool,
Yeah. So where's the line in general manager ethics? Where does all this kind of kick in? We're church pew sports, right? So Fitzy, obviously you're not going to get the same kind of a deal if you say to the other team, yes, send us, you're tired, you're poor, you're downtrodden. And if, by the way, if we happen to cut them, we're going to take your future away. You're not going to say that. But I don't know, how should it be happening?
Oh, man, that's a great question. It's one of those issues where honestly, it's one of those where you want to talk to the other team as best as possible and talk up the trade as highly as possible. And, kind of like what the Lakers did with, the Mavericks and the Jazz, be like, hey, we're going to trade, we got this trade. We'll give you players. We didn't say we're going to give you current players, but we're going to give you players. And, like we said earlier, the Jazz were like, yeah, we'll do it kind of thing. And then they found out that 2 of the players aren't even drafted yet. So, I mean, it's, you kind of, hide the truth. It's kind of like the hidden message of, yeah, we'll trade you these players, but you don't know who they are yet.
If Pelinka says to Danny Ainge, I need you to take these 2 players so we can get Luka, he's not taking those 2 players. So
not at all.
David Collins is wearing a hoodie that has the word villain written across the chest over a lion's silhouette. David, what's the all's fair in love and war? Is all fair in trading?
Yeah, like I look at it as a specific kind of ethic. So, for instance, like you're taught your whole life growing up, you're not supposed to lie. But then you play board games where the goal is to trick other people and to have them not know that you're the one that's, stealing or you're the murderer or whatever it is in these games. Within the context of that framework, lying's okay because you're trying to win a game. It's the same in sports. These are billionaires that are paying millionaires to handle their business and do their due diligence. And if you're not going to do that, it's cutthroat. If you watch football, every time a starting corner goes down, what is the next play? Throw at the backup.
Yes, right.
This is it's the world they live in. Like you can't get mad at somebody for maximizing their opportunities in that setting. If we're hanging out, you and me as friends, and I lie to you and I mistreat you, yeah, that's different because the ethic is different. It's a matter of in that context, it's absolutely okay to do what needs to be done to maximize your team's potential. It's the same if you ever played fantasy football. You want to make a trade with somebody, you're trying to get the better end of the deal and you're going to talk certain guys up and do certain things. It's just how it works. That's the ethic of that system. And if you're not willing to work within that or you're not willing to do your due diligence like Danny Ainge didn't do, that's on you. Like you're getting paid the money to do the job. And if you don't do the job to its like fulfillment, that's on you. Like I don't feel sorry for somebody that gets released like that. Like that's on you.
Did you read the contract before or the deal before you sign the paperwork, right? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I have a perfect illustration that you'll laugh at, David. So our fantasy football league is done for the year. And I won't tell you guys who won the championship, but I will tell you that the guy who finished last, next week I'm going to be at this conference and he's going to be there along with two or three other guys that are from our league. And so his consequence for finishing last, winning the toilet bowl, whatever, in our league is that anytime next weekend when we're all together for 4 days, anytime he walks in a room and one of the rest of us is in the room, he has to bow for the entire weekend. That's his consequence. It doesn't cost him anything. It's not even really that humiliating, but it's whatever. And he is refusing. He is saying that he is going to refuse to comply. And so as commissioner, I'm like, did you read the stuff that I sent you before you signed up to be in this league? You don't get to back out just because you didn't bother to read it and then you lost. And so we're embroiled in it right now. And he's going to be bowing next weekend. He's not going to be happy about it, but he will be bowing.
Good.
Noah Dahl, if you're listening, I'll see you next weekend. Yeah.
By the way, I have not heard any reports that Rob Pelinka misled or lied to Danny Ainge.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't color in the entire picture, but kind of, David, like you were saying, it's probably on Ainge to say, hey, is there anything else happening here? Why are you giving me a couple players? So there is some due diligence that's a part of the equation for these guys who are in managerial positions. I still remember back to when one of my favorite all-time Pistons, Joe Dumars, was serving as the GM of the Pistons, and they had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 4 or 5 straight years. They couldn't break through. They couldn't get back to the finals, but they're in the Final Four, right? And out of the blue, he goes and trades the heart and soul of that Piston team, Chauncey Billups, for a guy who was literally on his last legs, and Allen Iverson. The reaction in Detroit was fairly similar to what you're seeing in Dallas right now. I don't know if we have any city council audio, but it is fascinating to me how moments like this can stir up a fan base and can cost you your fan base. And so often with these big trades, there's another something going on. I don't pretend to know what that might be. I mean, David, could this it can't possibly be because he was out of shape. He's not he doesn't play defense. We know that. But he led the team to the finals, and he is, like you said, a generational player. Can a GM make a move like this without fully explaining to his fan base why he did it?
I think that's the tough thing, because in his press conference, he talked about how they wanted to win with defense. They wanted to focus more on, because they have Kyrie and Luka, statistically two of the worst defenders in the NBA.
Yeah.
And they wanted to find something where Kyrie could be the focal point and Anthony Davis can fill in the gaps. Like, it honestly, if that team was structured that way originally, I don't think it's that bad of a roster. But the problem is when Kyrie and Luka were playing together and playing well, they were unbelievable. And you're getting rid of a dude, and Luka is very bad defensively. But to simply say it's his conditioning is wild to me. But as you read all these comments, it's he wasn't conditioning. He didn't seem to get along with some guys. It's like they're throwing all these excuses out, and they're like, we need to find somebody with a little bit more of a veteran presence that can come in, play some defense, offer us something that we haven't had for a while. The whole thing is bizarre to me. I just don't know how you can get rid of that guy.
Yeah.
He's even when, like, they said he was like weighing like 270. I've seen footage of him shooting around. He doesn't look 270. And by the way, he's like, what, 6'8"? Like, it's not like he's carrying all this extra weight.
Oliver Miller.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just looking at it completely baffled by how you walk away from. I mean, like for instance, if the Pistons traded Cade Cunningham, who I love right now, it would bother me because I love Cade Cunningham. But Cade Cunningham, while an all-star, while a really good player, isn't Luka Doncic.
He's not an icon, right? Like that the city's around. Yeah.
And so it's like, again, you're talking about a top 5 player, like Charles Barkley or somebody, I can't remember who it was, Stan Van Gundy said Luka Doncic is the best offensive player he's ever seen.
Yeah.
The purely offensive player you've ever seen. And you're just giving that guy away for a 32-year-old Anthony Davis and a pick? It just does not make sense to me. It doesn't. And I've tried to. And here's the thing. I think the Mavs will actually be pretty good. They might make a little run. They're going to. And I think Anthony Davis is going to want to prove himself. But that doesn't mean that the next 10 years you're better off.
Yeah. Well, since we have this little precedent for coaches not being told about a seismic trade in their organizations, let's go to your most unlikely super fun trade sort of prediction, or just wish it would happen. So I'll lead us off with an example. Because of Ben Johnson's departure for the Chicago Bears, my favorite possible trade would be that Ben comes into work, not this weekend because Super Bowl time, everything's kind of slowed down, but get into spring and it's around draft time, and the super brilliant Bears front office has done nothing but prove themselves to be rocket scientists over the last few years. They surprise Ben. He comes into work and they announce to him, good news, we've shipped out Caleb and we've brought in Russell Wilson. Congratulations. Go ahead and make this work. Oh, and we're giving up the next 3 first-round picks because he's got Super Bowl rings. So there's my wish for my buddy Paul and the Chicago Bears fans out there, that they would just be treated to an outlandish trade like that. So,
Okay, so
Paul,
so let me just follow up on that and say, when you told me you were going to ask that question, Bill, I thought, okay, of course, as a Bears fan, I'm gonna figure out how to offload Caleb Williams because he's got a truckload of potential, and this is not. I'm not really taking a shot at him, but if I'm just going to like make up a trade that I think could actually happen, here's my speculation. I want you guys to tell me if you think that would never happen, or would you do this trade? Caleb Williams, a first and a second for Joe Burrow.
Yes, I would.
Would you make that trade?
Yes.
Yes.
If you're the Bears, you would make that trade?
Yes.
Yes.
Joe Burrow's unbelievable.
It's not because he's got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that he's unbelievable.
No.
I mean, I'm just asking the question. If I'm going to figure out a way to get Joe Burrow to the Bears, because the Bears are just a quarterback away, which has been true for like 30 years of my adult life, actually. That's my trade.
You know, it's funny you say that, Paul, because probably since the Hutchinson injury and the early talk about trading for Max Crosby and whether he'd be worth a couple first-round picks, I've found myself reevaluating the value of first-round picks with kind of in this context. And maybe we mentioned it on the podcast. If I was told for sure that my first round pick next year was going to be a Max Crosby type of player, I would be thrilled. So if I'm offered the chance to trade that pick for Max Crosby, then that would make perfect sense. And then you're only into the discussion about a future first round pick and whether you want to take that risk. But the one pick for an established player isn't as crazy as it might seem. So I've kind of reevaluated my value on draft picks a little bit.
Yeah, and clearly in the NBA, draft capital is losing its value. Like, what was that pick that the Lakers sent, like a 2031 or whatever? And I think the NBA has this weird rule that you can't trade consecutive first-round picks. So if you've already traded your 26 first rounder, you have to go back to 20. I don't know how the rule works and everything else, but like that's like 6 years from now, that pick.
That's forever.
Who knows if that's going to be a lottery pick or if that's going to be like pick number 31 or 30. You know what I mean? You just don't know.
Right. Fitzy, do you have an outlandish trade you'd like to suggest?
So there's one, it was funny. Bill, you texted me earlier this morning, asking me to be on the show tonight. And, I got back to you later than I wanted to, and I apologize for that. When I asked you what it was and you asked me, or you mentioned what the topic was, I started thinking about, NFL and trades like that. Now, I did hear that Myles Garrett wants to trade. So I got to thinking, I know Max Crosby's out there for defense. What if the Lions were to get Myles Garrett? And it might sound crazy, but what if the Lions were to trade for Myles Garrett, give up a first round, a second round, and either Gibbs or Montgomery?
Ooh.
Not Gibbs.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. That would be.
I'm saying one or the other. I mean, obviously. I mean, it's.
David Gibbs is untouchable, right?
Yeah, I mean, Gibbs put up 1,400 yards rushing, and he had like 60 less carries than Saquon. Like, if you give him those 60 extra carries, he's putting up 1,700 yards rushing. Like, he's too valuable. The second Montgomery went down, like, he was the best running back in football, practically, outside of, again, the guy who can hurdle people backwards.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, David, maybe just in one playoff game, you give him, let's say, 15 more carries.
Don't, Bill.
I can't.
Don't go there. Would you trade Garrett for Hutchinson straight up?
No.
I wouldn't, but only because of age. Because Hutch is still like so young.
And he's coming off a big injury. That doesn't bother you.
No, because before that injury, he was clearly going to be the defensive player of the year. Even after he went down in week 4 or 5, it took like 3 or 4 more weeks before somebody passed him in sacks. Yeah. He was going to dominate that season. It's just really sad. I just because of age, I just don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
But if you said for like 2 years and then we get him back, sure, I'd do that.
I love the outlandish hypothetical trade world that I've created. Here we go. Holy distant.
It's time to blow off some steam. Get it off your chest. Rant about what's most bothering you.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it.
It's time for Holy Discontent.
David is rubbing his hands in glee. David, lead us off.
Yeah, so my holy discontent right now is NBA refereeing, and not in general, specifically for one player.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a stat here. Cade Cunningham has the 3rd most games in NBA history with 20-plus points, 15-plus assists, and 0 free throws attempted. Third most in NBA history.
Like for career or for the season? For a season?
No, history.
Wow.
Like he has that. Like I have another stat. On the same night, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander shot 20 free throws in a game. But that same night, Cade Cunningham scored 40 points and had 3 free throws. Cade Cunningham goes to the rim. He's strong. He finishes in the paint, and he doesn't get any calls. It's bothering me in a way that, I'm sorry, my tone is a little off here. I'm very frustrated. The other night, at the end of the half, he has the ball in the lane, and he's pulling up to hit the shot. He's got a guy draped both arms, and he misses the shot. No foul called. You have role players getting that call. Cade Cunningham is a stud. He's an all-star, but here's the thing. He doesn't flop. He doesn't whine. He plays basketball the right way. I love him to death, and I'm very, very upset with the way that he's being officiated. He goes to the rim regularly. He dunks. He hits floaters. It drives me insane watching Pistons games and seeing this man who is an all-star, who is a stud, that does not get any respect. So I've been waiting all night for this holy discontent because it's driving me insane. Every night he's scoring 30 points a game. He's averaging double-digit assists. He's rebounding. He gets to the lane. He finishes, and he never gets the benefit of the whistle. And I see James Harden run in the lane and throw his arms out and flop around. He plays ball ethically. He plays ball the right way, and he gets punished for it, and it drives me insane. I'm wholly discontent.
That is very legit HD.
That was good.
Yeah, that's good. Paul?
Yeah, so for my holy discontent this week, I just need to tell you guys a story. Like yesterday, I'm in a hotel in Chicago. Yesterday morning, I wake up, or 2 nights ago, I'm going to bed and I'm on the TV's on and I'm thinking, oh, that's a pretty cool little feature in the hotel television. I can use the TV as my alarm clock. I've never done that before. So I set the alarm for like 6 a.m. because I have to get up early, and I have the TVs on ESPN. So I set the thing, right, and I go to bed and whatever. The next morning, the TV wakes me up at 6 a.m. and I roll over, and on the television screen, the headline is Kansas City disrespect. So here's my thing. I don't know what I'm discontent with. Am I discontent with the fact that I was duped into thinking that waking up to the television was a good idea versus like the alarm on my phone or whatever? That could be what it is. Could it be that I'm a little bit sick and tired of the whining from Kansas City, which has now evolved to the point where they are saying that they are being disrespected because of all the chatter about the ref, the officials being biased and all that other stuff? Could be that. It's most likely that. All I know from this little experience is that I'm not using the use your TV as an alarm clock feature ever again when I'm on the road. And it's certainly, I have no sympathy for Kansas City. Maybe it's both. Maybe I'm a little bit sideways about both of those things. I don't know. How's my tone?
I think your mistake was waking up
to be very.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little more fired up, but
yeah. Fitzy.
Oh man. I could go the time route because being a teacher, setting my alarm clock, it doesn't go off and I'm late in the morning. That could be one. The one thing that I would have though is, I love high school sports. I love high school basketball the most. And the one thing I've noticed a lot more this year is not only the players, but like coaches, like just, begging for calls, if that makes sense. And the ref, let's say Paul, says, hey, that was a travel. 3 seconds later, they'll call the whistle, call travel. It's like, let the refs ref the game. Like, you don't need to be in their ear 24/7 during the game. Let them, that's what they're there for. You coach, they ref. And I just feel like, and I could be wrong. I'm I can be a fan, I can be a scorekeeper or anything. It's what I notice. And it's just like it comes from both sides. It's not just one coach or one bench doing it. It's both of them. And the refs are like, oh, they want to travel. Okay, I'll give a travel. It's let the refs ref the game. It's not let the coach ref the game, if that makes any sense. And it's getting to the point where I don't want to watch high school basketball at this point.
And if that player is scoring 40 points and only getting 3 free throws, David's coming out of the stands.
Yep.
That's right. By the way, D, you're not wrong. And I was going to ask you, without elongating the segment too much, which is more egregious? The Lions having the most prolific offense in the NFL, but getting 1 offensive pass interference call for 5 yards on the season, or what's happening to Cade?
I mean, just because of the outlier, I would say the Lions, but the fact that it's every night with Cade,
yeah, it is every night.
Insane.
Yeah. My holy discontent is the last 2 minutes of every college basketball game. Tennessee and Missouri played a couple nights ago. The last 2 minutes and 49 seconds, there was a timer put on it, a real-time timer. The last 2:49 of the game took 23 minutes. There were 6 replay reviews. What are we doing here? It's making it unwatchable. It's making it unwatchable. I'm not even criticizing the quality of the officiating. I'm criticizing the processes that these rules have mandated, that every single out of bounds play, every single time a kid goes down, it's got to be the result of somebody committing a felony. So they have to review it and find out whether or not he's going to do 7 to 15 years. That's got to stop. It's unwatchable. And we're getting closer to tournament time, when all that stuff's going to be magnified, when we're going to have more TV timeouts, and it's just going to take forever. So I am preemptively registering my irritation with all of that mess, because it is way too much.
So the follow-up question, Bill, has to be, why are you watching the Tennessee-Missouri basketball game? Or did you just see it on a headline about it or
I
something?
saw the headline on the timing of it. I've watched the last couple minutes of some Michigan games because they're pretty good this year. Same thing's happening. Maybe it's different if my Wolverines don't blow every double-digit lead that they have and end up with a buzzer beater moment and everything's reviewed. But it is happening pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Right now, this minute, today, this week.
It's time for our That Guy segment, where we sing the praises of somebody who's doing it well. And Paul, I'll let you take us through this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to the Australian Open tennis tournament.
Let me interrupt you for a second. There's one lady from Hopevale Church in Saginaw, I believe her name is Jennifer, who pulled me aside like a month ago. And she said, I'm not making this up, I'm not exaggerating. She said, how come you guys never talk about the Australian Open?
Well, here we go.
And so this is her moment.
This is for you. At the Australian Open, Novak Djokovic pulls up in the semis because he's got an injury, and he pulls out of his match against Alexander Zverev, right? Djokovic isn't like a favorite son in Australia because of, him not taking the vax a couple years ago and them like banning him or deporting him when he tried to show up and play in the tournament. I don't know if you guys remember that, or I'm not sure the Australian Open is at the top of any of our news feeds, but so he's not a favorite. He pulls out, he gets booed off the court by all the fans, even though he just pulled out with an injury. And I saw like the interview with Zverev, who is now going to advance to the final. And I just thought it was really classy the way he handled it. And I think we got this for everyone.
Well, the very first thing I want to say is, please, guys, don't boo a player when he goes out with injury. I know that everybody paid for tickets and everybody wants to see hopefully a great 5-set match and everything, but you got to understand, Novak Djokovic is somebody that has given the sport for the past 20 years absolutely everything of his life. And He has won this turn with an abdominal tear. He has won this turn with a hamstring tear. If he cannot continue a tennis match, it really means that he cannot continue a tennis match. So please be respectful and really show some love for Novak as well.
Well done. Well done, man. I just thought that was great. So
that guy is James Van Riemsdyk, hockey player, lost 4 teeth, needed 30 plus stitches after taking a high stick in Friday's win in Utah. Had teeth removed and stitches to return to action and assisted on one of the comeback goals. Then a post-game x-ray revealed that a tooth was still lodged in his bottom lip after it was stitched. So the stitch was removed, the tooth was removed, and he was stitched back up again. But wait, there's more. Then came a bone graft and a pair of root canals. He's eating through a straw and is in the starting lineup tonight.
Of course, yeah.
And these guys, this is a different breed of human in the world of hockey. So James Riemsdyk is my that guy, because that is definitely not this guy for sure. David, do you have somebody you want to sing out?
Yeah, I got two. I want to elaborate on what you just said. I remember the Red Wings one time were in a playoff game and Chris Draper took a puck on the bottom of his lip, knocked out 2 teeth, puck dropped, he knocked it in and scored. They interviewed him after the game and he said, if I had to take a puck off my face every game, but it meant we won, I would do it. So Chris Draper won. The second one is Todd McClellan, sticking with the Red Wings. He took over as coach from Lalonde. They lost their first game. He sat with the team in practice and he said, play bleeping hockey. You know how to do this. Just do it. And we've won 7 in a row since. Todd McClellan, you are that guy this week.
That's so wild. And they are
perfect.
They are red hot.
4 in a row on a Western Canada road trip. Yeah. That's insane.
Did you see the Patrick Kane shootout winner?
Yes. Come on. That backhander, like,
yeah. They're exciting again. Yeah, it's kind of fun to have that happening for sure. Let's wrap things up with our 3-minute message.
Homer, I'd like you to remember Matthew 7:26. The foolish man who built his house on sand.
And you remember Matthew 21:17.
And he left them and went out of the city into Bethany, and he lodged there?
Yeah. Think about it.
Think about it. Okay. I don't know if it's because I'm currently at this EFCA theology conference and I've spent the last 2 days talking about the Nicene Creed and other things, and I'm learning a ton. And I don't know if that's put me in a mood, but here's what I want to talk about tonight for our 3-minute message in honor of our conversation about trades that have shocked us, or what makes a good trade, and how do you know who won a trade, et cetera. I want to read a verse that talks about the trade Jesus made on our behalf, trading our sins, our death sentence, our life away from him for an abundant, fulfilling, righteous, capital L life in him. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For he hath made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. So for all of you who are listening to this conversation and know Jesus and have cashed in on that trade that he made on our behalf, I just want to challenge all of us this week to take some time to pause and think about the exchange Jesus made for us, the trade that he made on our behalf. He took our sins so we could have capital L life in him. It's worth thinking about. It's worth living for.
Yeah, for sure. That's good stuff. And by the way, for those of you who have never checked out the YouTube version of Church Pew Sports, while Paul was delivering the 3-minute message, you could have walked with David to his bathroom and seen Fitzsimmons somehow turn purple like Grimace at McDonald's. Yeah. So you just never know what's happening from a visual standpoint, but we do
It's anarchy.
we do always honor the one tradition, and that is at the end of every episode to have a devotional. So we hope you all appreciate that. We appreciate you being a part of this conversation. Make sure you check us out at churchpewsports.com. Easy for me to say, but David did it to me. He just took
Fix that in post. Fix
Yeah.
that in post. Yeah.
That'll all be fixed. That's no problem. We'll figure out why Fitzy is purple, and we'll talk to you all again next week with a post Super Bowl recap, hoping to have a very special guest join us then. Thanks for being part of Church Pew Sports.